It's time for Herd Mentality, the weekly episode where you control the discussion today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Tuesday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day. And as a reminder to you, we are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by Birddogs, the most comfortable shorts, pants, and sweatpants with built-in liners. Go to birddogs.com, use promo code LOCKEDON, and boom, a free Bird Dogs rope hat with your pair of Bird Dogs. Well, folks, it's time for Herd Mentality. You guys sent in a lot of great questions once again. I look forward to responding to them here on the podcast. One more day in Kansas City before I head back to Charlotte and get back home. So again, if you're watching on YouTube, you know I'm still in the hotel room. And if I sound a little bit different than normal, it's because I'm on a different setup here as I'm on the road. But I'll be back in my normal situation tomorrow for the recording. Let's get into these great questions that you guys sent in. And again, try to prioritize the stuff that is the most commonly asked stuff, what I feel like most people are asking. And we get a lot of questions. And so I kind of try to sort through them and pick the stuff that it feels like people want to hear about the most. So let's do it. First one comes from John. John says, I'm curious to your thoughts on Isaiah McKenzie after yesterday's game where he seemed to develop an allergy to football. Do you see the door opening further for players like Khalil Shakir and maybe even James Cook in the slot game? Or do you think Lil Dirty will bounce back and be just fine? Well, obviously, the game against the Kansas City Chiefs was a bad game for Isaiah McKenzie. Big-time drop. Obviously, the fumble where he just wasn't looking for the ball. And you know, he's coming off the concussion, didn't play last week. I think he's mostly been good this year, though. Not necessarily good at it, good as in you forget about Cole Beasley and having that type of player in the slot, but good based on what I expected him to be. Running some over routes, doing some motion stuff, handling the kick return duties. I think he provides value in that regard. But what the Chiefs game served as a good reminder to all of us is that he is who he is, right? He can do certain things to help your team, but he's a player that has limitations. And so when used correctly, you can get production out of Isaiah McKenzie, and obviously he's a great guy for the locker room. He brings a lot to the football team, but he's not Cole Beasley. And they've very much platooned replacing Cole Beasley with Isaiah McKenzie, with Khalil Shakir now, that was Jamison Crowder, with using some of the tight ends flexed out, with using James Cook a little bit flexed out. So I think you continue to embrace this all-of-the-above approach when it comes to getting your slot production. And even in the Chiefs game, I felt like they did a good job of getting Steph Diggs kind of isolated in the slot a little bit. And even in the Pittsburgh game where there's some short motion, get him inside, give him some free releases, and let him go to work. The Bills found a lot of production that way. And so I think you continue to buy into all of those things, but it serves as a good reminder to Isaiah McKenzie and him being who he is. And who he is fine, but you just have to have that expectation of that's who he is. He can do some things to help you. He brings some speed. He wins on the over routes. Can separate from man coverage. He could do his thing as a kick returner. Give you some horizontal stuff. But at the end of the day, he's just not that guy in terms of feel as a route runner, adjusting to zone, getting to his spots, understanding how to make himself available when it needs to be quicker, right? Those are not things that are natural to him. And I don't think they will be. I think there's a reason McKenzie's market was what it was and that he came back for the deal that he got, even though he said otherwise. I think there's a reason for all that, and you were reminded of that. But I think at the end of the day, he's mostly been good for what I expect him to be for this football team. Next one comes from Rich. Rich says, I've always been a fan of Matt Milano since the Bills drafted him. He's been great. This season, though, he's on a different level. I can't think of a more underrated player in this league. He is quietly having an all-pro level season, and I don't think anyone outside of Buffalo is noticing. He is a difference maker every week, so big props to Beane for locking him up. Do you think locking Tremaine up next has to be Beane's next priority? Really hope I get to watch him and Tremaine continue to play at a high level for a long time. Let's start by talking about Matt Milano. He is having a great season. This is the best 6-game stretch I think I've seen from Matt Milano, and that's not because Matt Milano hasn't been great before. It's just that he's elevated his game this year. He said something on One Bills Live during training camp, if I'm not mistaken. And here's the quote. I went back and watched it. He said, "I'm just trying to be dominant this year. Everything I do, in the run game, in pass game, locking people up, making tackles, being all over the field, that's what I'm trying to do. Every play, I'm going crazy." He's backing up those words, right? You can feel that in the way he plays. When you're watching Matt Milano play, you can listen to that quote and say, yep, that's what he's doing. He's trying to be dominant. Everything I do, the run game, the pass game, locking people up, making tackles, being all over the field, that's what I'm trying to do. Every play, I'm going crazy. He is. And he's elevated his game. He's brought an emotional energy to the defense. Think about some of the plays that if he didn't make them, how big the result would have been for the other team. He's been so good. So, yeah, I'm in on Matt Milano having his best year. I'm in on Matt Milano being a surefire Pro Bowler and a guy that should be an All-Pro as well, based on 6 games. As for Tremaine Edmunds being the next priority for Brandon Beane, I am in on an extension for Tremaine Edmunds. But I also recognize the challenges that are ahead for Brandon Beane, where you need a starting left guard next year. You need to figure out your running back situation with Devin Singletary expiring. You got to figure out, who's going to replace Jordan Phillips and Shaq Lawson, and maybe it's those people. Tremaine, Jordan Poyer. You got a lot of contracts that are out. Backup quarterback, right? There's a lot. And here's what I'll say, and this is the most boring thing that a football analyst can say, but I'm going to say it right now. I just trust Brandon Beane implicitly. He's done so well. He's prioritized the contracts so well. He's gotten great deals so well to this point. He's drafted so well. And so, yeah, he's got a tough situation ahead of him. But I know there's a plan. I know he's going to execute. And he's done the right thing for this football team every step of the way. I'm willing to convince myself that Tremaine Edmunds, as a 24-year-old player, entering his prime, leader of a top-tier defense, coming into his own, the rare skill set that he has and how it impacts the way the Bills can play defense, I recognize that value. And you contrast that to other players, and everybody else has a compelling case too. So it just goes back to me having implicit belief in Brandon Beane to do the right thing. And while I'll have my preferences, and I'll certainly share them on this podcast, I'm comfortable living in a world where I say, you know what, Brandon Beane, I trust you implicitly. And that's kind of the approach that I'm taking right now. Again, I'll have my opinions. I'll share them. I want Tremaine Edmunds back. But that's my approach. That's my mindset right now. Next one comes from Will, who says, I felt like every time the Bills had a disappointing play on defense, Siran Neal was nearby. He also had a critical penalty. I know he's not bad, but it feels like we have better options in Benford, Elam, Jackson. So curious why he was on the field so much. And if the reason is to guard Kelce, why not Milano? Good question. Got a lot of this, to be honest with you. I think that was part of their plan. Part of their plan for Travis Kelce was Siran Neal. And using the size and power that Neal has is the best matchup option. We just talked about how good Matt Milano is playing. Matt Milano has also struggled against Travis Kelce in the past. And so I think the Bills were just looking for a different way, a different plan. And a lot of that was Siran Neal. And a lot of that was Dane Jackson, too. He got a lot of one-on-ones. Poyer had some one-on-ones with Kelce. So it wasn't the only plan, but it was part of it. And I think the Bills kind of leaned into how good Siran Neal played against Pittsburgh, right? He was phenomenal at the end of that game. And just trying something to see if it could provide a spark and help neutralize Kelce a little bit. But the reality is, for as good as Matt Milano is and how important he is at defending tight ends, Kelce hadn't met his best matchup. My buddy Chris sent me an email as well, and he invoked the name Terrell Bernard. And that got me perked up. Because I think Terrell Bernard is a player that, as a hybrid linebacker type player, that should have the athleticism and well, I guess the size. Kelce's a big dude. But gives you the physical traits to give you a chance to match up with him. Terrell Bernard's a guy that is interesting to me. Now, I think with Terrell Bernard, you have to be willing to put him on the field and really limit what's on his plate and say, hey, you just got to play Kelce. Now, that puts you at a disadvantage on defense as well, where, there's going to be some checks and audibles like, okay, that guy's on the field. He's maybe not so comfortable in the system. Let's change what we're doing and try to isolate him and make him a problem for the defense, right? So there's some give and take there as well. But I think in time, I'd love to see that become something that Terrell Bernard does. And I thought Bernard played a really good game against Kansas City on teams. But obviously the impact on defense hasn't quite been there yet, and I'm not surprised by that. The Bills are a base nickel defense. Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano are still here. Terrell Dotson has time on task in the system and is the logical player to step in for Tremaine when he was out against Pittsburgh. But yeah, as a third-round pick, I think at some point, maybe not even at all this year, but at some point you do want to feel like Terrell Bernard is a core player for this defense. And maybe that's kind of his path. So we'll see on all that. But I think I'm less bothered by the Siran Neal thing just because I thought he played well against Pittsburgh, and they've used him a little bit in the past for this type of role, and they tried something because what they've done in the past hadn't worked. So I think I'm okay with it, even though if it didn't produce great results. Travis Kelce's going to make an impact on every football game that he plays. And I guess fortunately for the Bills, he didn't score a touchdown. Folks, I got to tell you about Birddogs. I recently got a pair of their shorts and joggers, and they are awesome. Great design, super fashionable. They're comfortable. The joggers are great for golf. I actually played a round of golf in the joggers, and I thought that they were really, really comfortable. I love wearing joggers with a hoodie. As you can see, I got a hoodie on right now. Birddogs joggers, they're phenomenal, and they're super high quality. They have something for everyone. They just launched sweatpants as well, so check those out. If you're in the South and you want shorts, you can get them. You want to get something a little heavier for being up north in the wintertime, you can get some sweatpants as well. Birddogs is actually higher quality than Lululemon, but they cost less. Joggers at Birddogs, they're $20 less than Lululemon. So go to birddogs.com, enter promo code LOCKEDON, and they'll throw in a free Birddogs rope hat. Check it out. You got to get one of these free hats. Again, birddogs.com, enter promo code LOCKEDON. You'll get the free Birddogs rope hat. That's birddogs.com, promo code LOCKEDON, and boom, a free Birddogs rope hat with your pair of Birddogs. It's the most comfortable shorts, pants, and sweatpants with built-in liners. You will not take these things off, I promise you. Check them out. The next one today comes from Kev. Kev says, I didn't see much from Jordan Poyer or Greg Rousseau while watching Sunday's game. This is not to suggest that neither had an impact. I just didn't see much of them on TV. I'd like to hear your thoughts from your game analysis of these two players. By the way, I started Dawson Knox in my fantasy football league based on your projection that he'd have a good game, including a touchdown, and it paid off, so thank you for that. I'll tell you what, I'm not great at fantasy football at all, but that was a good prediction. I felt that one coming, so I was glad to see that happen and glad to see that paid off for you, Kev. So let's talk Poyer and Rousseau here, specifically against Kansas City. I thought Rousseau played well. The run defense was pretty good. I thought his contain efforts with his rush was good. He had 3 pressures in the game rushing the passer, I think on 23 pass rush snaps, so he had an impact. Now, he played well, but I don't think he had the splash plays, right? The big tackles for loss or sacks, right? Those weren't there, but he got pressure. He contained well. He fit the run well. And I think he had a big pass breakup as well, right? On a kind of a quick out pass from Pat Mahomes, Rousseau got his hands up. So he had an impact, and I thought he played well. He just wasn't like a super high impact, game-changing player. But they got that from Von, and I think that's okay. As for Jordan Poyer, it felt like he was playing in deeper alignments than normal. And maybe that's kind of playing into his, I guess, rib, lung injury, whatever's going on there. And maybe kind of wanting to keep him a little further away from the action, use his intelligence, stay leverage over the top, make sure that they didn't get vertical. And it felt like DeMar Hamlin was kind of more the low safety at times. So that was my impression from just kind of watching the game and being there and, you know, being mindful of alignments and what the teams are trying to do to each other. I felt like the reason you didn't feel Poyer to the way that you do sometimes is because he was playing deeper alignments for this game, more of a game plan specific, potentially based on whatever's going on with his rib lung situation. Chad says, I have been a little on the fence with paying Jordan Poyer due to wanting to prioritize younger players for the future. However, I do think he's earned the right to be paid by us, and I'm now leaning towards doing it. Obviously, the first couple of games, he was great with important picks, but I've just seen Diggs share something on Instagram claiming Poyer drove 15 hours to play against the Chiefs as the doctors wouldn't give him clearance for his ribs to play. That's the kind of guy I want on my football team. Just wondered your realistic thoughts on paying Poyer and if his performance this year so far has pushed him up your priority list to be back next year. So he was cleared to play the game. He just wasn't cleared to fly. So let's just make that distinction right now. Of course, to answer the question, of course I want Jordan Poyer to get paid, and I want him on this football team for as long as possible. I don't think that him driving 15 hours to play in this game is the reason why, though. That's awesome. I'm not trying to take anything away from that. The way that this guy's played in the field since 2017 is why he deserves the extension. It's not a question of deserving it. It's a question of prioritization, right? Can you make it fit, right? Can you pay everyone? And I know for the most part, Beane has, right? There hasn't been that really hard loss yet, right? Where you're like, man, they just couldn't fit this guy in and he had to leave. That hasn't happened yet. And so going back to what I said a little bit earlier, I just kind of trust Beane. I want Poyer back. I want him to play every game for the rest of his career for the Buffalo Bills. I want that. But can it happen? Can they pay all these guys? Can they fit them in? I hope so. Because this is a fun football team, and you kind of hate to think about any of them leaving, right? Core players, key players, superstar player in Jordan Poyer. If he's not back, I would understand it from the perspective of, you know what? There's a shelf life. He's older. You got to prioritize the players you drafted and developed. And in a way, you developed Poyer, and he became the best version of himself. But, like, I do find myself leaning into Tremaine a little bit more, personally. But I do trust Beane, and I want them all back. I really do. I'm jealous for these players. I don't want nobody else to have them. I want them to play for the Bills. I want them to have a lot of success with the Bills. You feel really attached to them, right? It's not like 10 years ago, right, where it's just like, all right, whatever. Now, these are dudes, right? You feel really deeply connected to this team. You don't want anybody gone. Jordan Poyer, of course, high on that list. Skip says, how do you think David Questenberry, AJ Epinesa, and Boogie Basham played against the Chiefs? Obviously, Questenberry had to step in. Spencer Brown left the game with an ankle injury. At first, it looked very severe. They brought out the cart for him. Some of the teammates started to gather around him. And then after a little bit of time, he got up and actually walked off the field under his own power. Came back in a boot. Sean McDermott, of course, on Tuesday or Monday morning when he met with the media, gave you nothing. Gave you nothing on Spencer Brown. Said, yeah, it's an ankle. We'll take it one day at a time. Don't have an update. Well, yeah, of course, Sean. He's not going to give you anything when it comes to injuries that he doesn't have to give you. So we'll probably sit here and wonder for the next week about what's going on with Spencer Brown. All that to be said, David Quessenberry came in and played well, right? He played how you would want your swing tackle to come in and get you out of a game. Boogie and AJ, I thought they were fine. They had good rushes. More so AJ than Boogie in this game. But I will say that I think Shaq Lawson, for the most part this year, has me believing he's the third best defensive end on this team behind Von and Greg Rousseau. Now, I don't think any one of the three is a liability, but I think I've felt the most impact from Shaq. But they're all worthy of playing time. Good problem to have. I think they've played fine. Skip had a follow-up that I'm going to kind of lump in here with a question from Doug. Doug has a statement and then a question, so let's kind of work through this. Doug says, in the mid-third quarter, Kansas City got a big benefit from a missed pass interference call when Marquez Valdez-Scantling picked open Juju Smith-Schuster with a blatant pick off the line for a 43-yard gain that led to KC's only second-half touchdown. I realize these calls are often missed, but it was just so obvious to how Juju got open. It was just very frustrating that it was not called. This is a play that doesn't stand out to me, and that's probably because I didn't watch the TV copy of this game yet. I will say that you're allowed to do some things within 1 yard of the line of scrimmage. So if it was immediately at the line, you have some grace there as an offensive player. But, I need to look at that play a little bit more, but I wanted to share that on there. And if people have feedback, they can let me know. And when I rewatch the game, I'll probably have more to offer there. Doug continues and says, upon rewatching Tehran's interception, I realized we were only rushing 3 with Milano spying upon Mahomes. Have you seen us just deploy this previously? Is it us mimicking the Bengals recipe from last year's AFC Championship game? And then Skip also said how much of the Bengals game plan against KC in the AFC title game was used by Frazier. I've watched that Bengals game obviously live, and then I studied it over the summer when I was studying the Bengals and the Chiefs, to be honest with you. And they were so creative with what they did, and I think the biggest thing that I would say about the Bengals from half to half is that they played a completely different game in the second half compared to the first, right? They evolved. They changed their game plan so much, and that's what I think gave Kansas City some of the fits that really forced them to shell up in the second half and lose the game. But the staple, right, in the second half was rush 3, drop 8, right? And they were able to really affect the quarterback still with Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard. And then inside they had B.J. Hill and DJ Reader and those guys getting some good interior push. They did a good job with that. So even though they rushed 3 and dropped 8, they did a really, really good job with getting pressure with 3, which is very hard to do. The Bills did lean into that on that play. 2 thoughts on that. First, the question is, have I seen the Bills do that before? Yes, absolutely. And at times it frustrates me because I'm a big fan of rushing 4. Because I think it's just really hard to get pressure with 3. And I think pressure is so important. So that's the basis of my philosophy. I thought what the Bills did there on that particular play was obviously Milano's the spy in the secondary contain. And the secondary contain is the piece that I want to focus in on because Von got the pressure, right? And he got the pressure by going inside. And if you're going to go inside, then you better have strong secondary contain because Pat Mahomes is going to flee the pocket and he's going to kill you. We've seen it a million times. But when Von beat that right tackle, Andrew Wiley, for the sack, I think in the second quarter, it was on an inside spin. And so I think they wanted to make sure that Von had a two-way go with his rush by having good, strong secondary contain with Matt Milano, which allowed them to kind of lean into the rush 3, drop 8. And, you could say Milano was a coverage player, but, he was more of a spy, right, to your point, and became a secondary contain player. So those are the dynamics that I think go into that. That's what I think about when I consider the stuff that was brought up in here. But I'm not sure the Bills were nearly as diverse with their defensive scheme as Cincinnati typically is and how they were in that game. It's not a shot on the Bills. They typically don't have to do that stuff. They're able to kind of play the game that they want to play and dictate terms, where I think the Bengals kind of needed some of that creativity to make it work for them. just on some of their limitations at corner and maybe not having a ton of speed at linebacker. I hope you have been getting in on the action over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is my favorite daily fantasy resource. How does it work? You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. So you look at a game, and they'll give you a player. Or let's say it's Josh Allen, right? And they say over under 275 passing yards, higher or lower. You pick higher or lower. Stephon Diggs, higher or lower, 80 receiving yards. You pick it. And if you get these correct, you can win a bunch of money. So check it out. It's super easy to do. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. It's not just football. They got basketball, hockey, golf, tennis, boxing, whatever sport you want to check out. They have it for you over at PrizePicks. So download the PrizePicks app or go to the prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match worth up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. So if you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to use our promo code LOCKEDON at sign-up for an instant deposit match worth up to $100. As you gear up for fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. You can create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network with over 810 million people. Then you just add your job and the purple hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. LinkedIn has super simple tools like screening questions to make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Let's get to a few more here today. The next one, comes to Scarecrow, who says, since you pay more attention to the Panthers than most, I would like to know your thoughts on the Christian McCaffrey trade rumors. Well, I think the Bills would be a better team if they had Christian McCaffrey. I do have some thoughts about that. First of all, the number one thought in my mind when I think about this is I really like Devin Singletary. I like the way Josh Allen talks about him. I like the way Sean McDermott talks about him. I like how he's been so reliable for this football team. I think he's the best running back the Bills have. Is Christian McCaffrey a better player than Devin Singletary? Yes. I would love him as a running back mate to go with Christian McCaffrey or Devin Singletary, right? That'd be a good duo. You feel good about that. I worry about a change in emphasis, right? I want this Bills football team to be about throwing the football. And if you kind of pour more assets into your running back situation, you wonder about some changes in your approach to playing the game. I wouldn't give more than a 4 for him. And I'm also mindful of McCaffrey's a great player, but he's been injured, right? And he's a running back. I know that his contract's very favorable, but what type of commitment are you looking at beyond this year? I think there's some things to consider. I don't think I'd be mad about it, but I'm not sitting here saying, man, the Bills have to go get Christian McCaffrey. They need this. Now, if Devin Singletary gets hurt, then yeah. But I have very mixed feelings about this. I never really look at a football team and say, man, you know what they need? Running back, another running back. Not because I don't think running backs aren't important. I think they're important, but the value behind it, right? How you get them and just what history tells us kind of puts me in a different mind place. But I recognize that McCaffrey can help the team if he's healthy. I also loved what Devin Singletary's offering. I love the chemistry piece of it. I'm sure that he would be a pro if McCaffrey was brought in, but you're kind of onboarding a unique piece to your offense. Wouldn't hate it. wouldn't also just not sitting here saying, man, I hope this happens. I'm very, very much on the fence, but I live in a world where I get nervous about Devin Singletary not being available and it becoming a James Cook, Zach Moss situation. I don't like that idea at all. So you can see, I hope you can feel that I'm really unsettled on this. I'm really unsettled on this, but I do worry about running back depth. I recognize what McCaffrey could offer. I worry about what the commitment is, right? Not just from what you'd have to give up, but your financial obligations beyond this year. It's kind of a tough situation. And I think the position that I tend to be more willing to not get overly concerned about depth and production is running back, but we'll see. He'd make the team better. I'll admit that. Brian says the Bills are in the red zone with the game on the line. Offensive coordinator Joe Marino has the perfect play dialed up for a slot receiver to score a touchdown. Who do you trust more, Isaiah McKenzie or Khalil Shakir? Well, I'm probably going to consider Diggs and Davis and Knox more, right? But I know that you're kind of pinning me down and you want me to kind of look at this from a McKenzie or Shakir situation. You know, Shakir feels like the more easy choice here because he hasn't had the blunders that we've seen from an Isaiah McKenzie. And certainly we're coming off of a game here where he dropped a touchdown pass. But I've seen Isaiah McKenzie catch a whole lot more touchdown passes in the NFL than I have Khalil Shakir. So I choose Isaiah McKenzie. I do. Nothing against Shakir. I don't know. I lean into the more experienced player. And I'm going to try not to be a victim of the moment with the blunders that McKenzie had on Sunday against KC. Vin says, I was hoping for your thoughts first on Harrison Butker and the Chiefs at halftime. They were acting like they just kicked the game winner, but it was still only halftime. That just bothered me. Act like you've been there before. I was also hoping to get your thoughts on what Daboll has done with the Giants this season. Going into the year, I thought maybe Saquon Barkley could be a trade option for Buffalo. Now there's no shot they move him. I don't really take exception with the Chiefs and what they were able to do. That's a tough accomplishment that they had as a team. 12 seconds left, getting themselves into range, hitting a 62-yard field goal, the longest in club history. And Harrison Butker has not been available recently. He's been injured, and that's been a problem for Kansas City. They probably don't lose to the Colts if they have Harrison Butker. So I think it meant a lot for their team. It meant a lot for Harrison Butker to get healthy and break a record. It meant a lot for their team to get down and score points. You know, the Bills had just scored a touchdown. They had the momentum going into halftime. Now you go out and you put that together and you kind of seize and take some of that momentum. I think it was a big moment for the Chiefs, and for as much as I don't like it, if the Bills did the same thing, I would feel the same way. I'd be really excited about that. So it was a great accomplishment for the kicker, for the team. Football's hard, man. You do good stuff, celebrate. I'm for it. As for Daboll and the Giants, man, how impressive is that? They're not talented. That's the thing about the Giants. That's where I've wrestled and struggled with this. And if you listen to the Draft Dudes podcast, we've spent a lot of time talking about Brian Daboll and this Giants team. They're not talented, right? They're not 5-1 talent good on their roster, but they're finding a way to win. Their team reminds me so much of the Bills in 2017. Sean McDermott's first year, 9-7. You get to the playoffs. You know you really don't deserve to be there. You really know you're not that good of a team to be in the playoffs, but you get there, and along the way, you get so much buy-in from the locker room to your coaching, and it allows it to kind of take off. And I really respect that about Brian Daboll. He's maximizing that roster. They're finding a way to win, and I'm rooting for him. I really am. Is it sustainable? No. This is not sustainable right now. But keep winning games, keep adding talent, and keep building. They got a good situation going. It sounds like Daboll is doing all the stuff we knew about him in Buffalo. Connecting with players, communicating, developing a culture, getting guys to buy in and play for each other, not just themselves. And that type of stuff, right? That can help you overcome a lack of talent. And it can beat talent, right? That's what's happened. They're getting some quality wins here. So they got to get better players on their team. But how exciting is what they've been able to get done so far? If I'm a Giants fan, I'm through the roof excited about this. So I'm happy for him. I'm rooting for him. Saquon's their team, right? He's the guy that I think is most responsible for where they're at as a team right now. They've leaned on him a ton. And Daniel Jones is not being put in those critical situations where typically in the past he's kind of turned over the football. Saquon's been critical for them, and I don't think for 1 second they're interested in moving on from him right now. Now they got a bigger question to ask themselves in the offseason, and if this continues, what that contract's going to look like. But for now, I think you do everything you can to get yourself in position to go to the playoffs. They're 5-1. If they win 3 or 4 more games, they're probably in the NFC. So I think we're all kind of rooting for the Giants. Maybe not. Maybe you didn't like Daboll. I know a lot of people didn't like Daboll, so maybe you're not about it. But I like Dave's. I like Joe Shane. I hope they do well. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. Tomorrow, I'm going to get into some self-scouting. Going to look at this team analytically and talk about what's working and what's not working as we reflect on 6 games and get ready for the rest of the way. Should be fun. Come on back. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. And I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.